Greetings, cats, and welcome to the first comeback of the Creeping Pasta Cat podcast. I am your host, Kyle Alexander Thomas. Now, I have been on leave for quite some time due to the move, my new job, needing to get good recording equipment, finishing school, and starting the beginning of my transition. I recently came out as a trans man. In any case, introductions out of the way, I'll get this show on the road. Now, relax in your cozy bed. Leave your day-to-day worries behind, because I have stories of things you should place your fear in. The buzzer. Credit goes to Anthony. Tuesday afternoon. Tick, 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 tick. The clock stops. I bang the alarm clock on my bedside table, trying to get it to start up again. No luck. It must have been the rain, I think. That goddamn rain must have ruined it when I ran it from the car. I just get to this apartment and shit's already breaking. Great. In the listing, this place looked like an amazing place to bum out, waiting for my first semester as a freshman to start. A quiet little apartment on a quiet little street, but still not that far from the university. It sure as hell beats the dormitories. It must even have a cool view out the door on the bottom floor, right down the street and out into the city. The bottom floor is set up like most places around here. One door with buzzers for each apartment on the wall. When a room is buzzed, it says the apartment number and then lets the visitors say what they need. It's all rustic and cool, but still modern. My apartment number is 6. After admiring the view and mentally reminding myself to take a picture of it later, I close the door and climb the 3 flights of stairs up to my apartment. Once inside, I look around, decide the boxes looked organized enough, and retire to my bedroom. The room's a little musty, but I turn my phone alarm on, plug it into the charger, and climb into bed. I'm quickly asleep. I don't dream. At least I don't think I don't. I sit in darkness, night quickly flying by, but suddenly the dark feels somehow too dark and very close. I wake up, sweat on my forehead. I'm up nearly 5 seconds when my phone alarm goes off. It's 8 a.m., Wednesday morning. I bum around for the next few days, get my boxes unpacked, and look around the neighborhood a bit. It's nothing special, a typical area for this part of the world. Suddenly, surprisingly, it's Friday night. No plans, the entire neighborhood basically sketched out in my head by now. Realization comes to me. I have yet to take that picture. I pick up my camera, put a new memory card in it. The door closes, and another one opens. I'm at street level. Click, click, click. The sun's nearly down. It's raining. I don't want my camera, of all things, to get wet. Satisfied with what I saw in the viewfinder, the door closes again, and I'm at my apartment door. I stick my key in the door, and my right shoulder glows cold. I open the door and pull the shirt off my shoulder, trying to get the water off my skin, but I notice it's dry. Odd, I think, but shrug it off and go to my computer, plug my camera on, leave it to sync, and go to bed. Lights off, eyes closed. A noise wakes me up. The alarm on my alarm clock is going off, not my phone. I impulsively smack it and it immediately goes dead. My room is dark, darker than it should be. I get up, walk into the living room, half conscious. I notice my camera's syncing is done. I walk over there and start scrolling through pictures. The third one catches my eye. There's a dark figure there. One not there in the others. Abruptly, my apartment gets buzzed. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Over and over. Groups of 3. The automated voice announces 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. The room goes cold. Alright, this next story that we have here is called Small Town Mysteries, and credit goes to Christine Druga. No one knows where it came from. No one knows why it showed up in our little town of all places. The only thing we knew for sure was that it was bizarre. The statue appeared in the town square about 2 weeks ago. It sits in the middle of a section of grass decorated with a handful of park benches that creates a cul-de-sac for the town's mayor office, police station, and courthouse. At first, everyone thought it was dropped off by a local artist trying to cause a stir and make a name for himself. He denied it and didn't cause a fuss when crews loaded it onto a truck and took it to the dump. When the statue returned to the exact same spot 2 days later, the people of the town thought maybe it was a prank by someone in the next town over. Two small towns only a few miles apart tend to have some pretty intense high school sports rivalries. And those tend to produce the weirdest and sometimes the most elaborate pranks. No one from that town claimed responsibility either. And the statue was removed again. The next day, the statue mysteriously appeared once more. I decided it was time to go take a look. There was a decent crowd surrounding the 8-foot-tall obelisk. There isn't much that goes into a small southern town, and a mystery like this one is bound to have everyone talking. The sculpture was shaped like a man. It stood upright and had 2 arms and 2 legs. No tail, no horns, no claws. The limbs are too long, and it had 6 long fingers on each hand. The head was smooth and bald, with 1 large eye, a wide bulbous nose, and a too long mouth. It was strange, as strange could get. Some people thought it was funny, some thought it was creepy, but we were all unsettled by it. The monument drew a near constant crowd for a few days before people started disappearing. People go missing, everyone understands that, despite how tragic it is. It is, however, highly unusual for 12 people to vanish without a trace in the span of a week from a town with less than 4,000 residents. The statue was put on the back burner by pretty much everyone, while the gossip switched to the possibility of a serial killer or human traffickers plaguing our little slice of utopia. Those that didn't forget the statue thought that it might be connected to the missing people, and they were written off as crazies. I think they're right. It's only a theory and I could be wrong. I could be imagining things, but I swear the statue has moved. Not its place in the grass. I think it's changed position. I've been out to see it almost every day, and I swear its mouth was closed tight and its arm straight on its side. I would bet my life savings that when that thing first appeared, it didn't hold its head cocked ever so slightly to the left. I don't think anyone else has noticed the changes. I don't think people are done disappearing. And I don't think that statue is a statue. Alright, this next story is called Next Time I'll Summon a Smarter Demon. This story, for our third story, this one is called Next Time I'll Summon a Smarter Demon. Next time I'll summon a smarter demon. Credit goes to Christine Druga. I drew the pentagram and symbols on the hardwood floor, lit the candles, and recited the spell that was written in the ancient, leather-bound book. Squaring my shoulders and setting my jaw might have made me look more confident, but I was nervous as hell. I doubt anyone would blame me. Summoning one's first demon is more than slightly terrifying, but I needed to do it. I had tried everything else I can think of to set my crumbling life back on track, and supernatural intervention was my last resort. Thick black smoke swirled within the circle of symbols as tortured screams filled the room. Just a few short minutes after I'd spoken the last word of a spell, a giant creature stood before me. It sniffed the air before locking its bulging orange eyes on me. I imagined it would have narrowed them in its expression of disgust, but it didn't have any eyelids. It wrinkled its bulbous nose and brought its thick, chapped lips into a sneer around 2 thick fangs. "Human, why you bring me here?" Its voice boomed, like it was speaking through a microphone, and my ear was right next to the speaker. I stammered. I want to make a deal with you. Its rotund belly bounced as it laughed hysterically for a moment. "I make no deal, dumb human." "What? Why not?" I demanded. "The book said..." "Book wrong. Human soul. Worth nothing like human." No, I did not waste all this time and money for some idiot demon to tell me it was for nothing. You're going to help me or I'll... I was interrupted by an angry roar. The demon clenched its clawed fingers into a fist and came at me, splintering the wood beneath its enormous hoofs with each step. I don't know if the creature didn't see the ceiling fan because the room was dark or because it was so furious that it wasn't paying attention, but I was given the opportunity to run while its head smashed through the wooden blades and the globe around the bulbs shattered. The abandoned house where I had performed the ritual was unfamiliar to me, and I prayed that I was running toward the exit as the demon crashed through my door of the empty room I had chosen for my venture. It slammed into the wall and raced after me, stumbling over decaying furniture left behind by the long-gone inhabitants of the dwelling. I let out a half-victorious, half-terrified yell as I found the stairs to the first level and began my hurried descent. Just as I reached the front door, near the base of the steps, I heard a loud, deafening yelp followed by a loud crash. The demon had tripped at the top of the stairs and tumbled down them. Once its massive body hit the landing at the bottom, the floor collapsed and the monster fell into the basement below. The sudden silence intrigued me, so I cautiously walked over to the giant hole in the floor and peered through it. The creature let out a groan and gingerly sat up while rubbing its head. It looked around the rotting basement before shifting its gaze up at me. The dazed look on its face was replaced by one of embarrassment, followed by one of fury. It got on its feet and reached for the remnants of the floor above. When it realized that it couldn't quite reach, it jumped. You would think that a powerful creature would have no problem leaping the 2 feet it needed, but it wasn't even close. When it landed, one of its hoofs awkwardly hit some rubble, and the beast fell on its back. It growled in frustration, sat up, and glared at me intensely. I suddenly felt freezing cold and blazing hot at the same time, and decided that was the time to get out of Dodge. I ran to my car, and thanked God that I picked a place in the middle of nowhere. At least no one was in imminent danger if that thing ever escapes. At least if it decides to attack you, you'll hear it coming from a mile away. For our next story, credit goes to O.H. Manchester, and the story is called Sprawl and Its Discontents. Alice is telling the guys she doesn't know that she wants to see the end of the world. They aren't talking to her. No one is talking to her. The party happens around her as if she is hermetically sealed. Outside it's snowing. She pauses for a second on the patio, next to the 4 kids, smoking and discussing Nick Roge movies, time-slipped crushes on Julie Christie. They don't notice Alice. The falling snow looks like pieces of something that exploded in the sky and is now drifting downward. She pushes the rubble off her shoulders and hair. She walks into the woods. The forest is behind the house having the party. Typical semester break thing. Everyone home from school and getting drunk with old friends they hate. This is the new growth exurbs. Homes of parents with 2-hour commutes and kids raised by daycare. These woods Alice is walking into are the old growth forests. These are the woods that have always been. The trees are all white, with stark dead branches for arms. It's here, out on the margins of the forest, where she first saw the white thing. Her footsteps crunch and press into the bright ground. Motion detector lights pick up on the way she walks, like a magnet being thrown at a refrigerator. Her bright red ballet flats look like she's bleeding, but the only trail is her footsteps. How does the Little Mermaid story really end? Not the Disney version, the first version, the real version. What happens to Ariel again? What always happens to girls in fairy tales. You watch her walk out of the party and off the patio and through the backyard into the trees. You say hi to the smoking kids. They look like fireflies in winter. You're friends with Nate and he's here. You just quit smoking. You want to smoke a billion cigarettes. You just ask Nate for one. Out in the yard, the snow looks like jigsaw puzzle pieces. The only way you know how to build them is to find the flat edges and build borders first. These snowflakes melt in your hand before you can see where they fit. You hate these parties. You're trying to stay sober and it's awful. All these kids with their jello shots and jello laughter and jello thighs. You just got out of treatment. Treatment wasn't cool. You shouldn't even be here. Not right now. Edward, the counselor at the center, always said, when you leave treatment, imagine that you are in Italy, because you are in a very fragile place in your recovery. You hate people who say things and wait for you to laugh. You know Alice in this really shallow way. If she's the pond, you're the rock skimming across the surface. You went to high school with her and had a muted crush on her. You didn't have any classes together because she had it together while you had it unraveled. There was this phenomenal distance to her that you found fascinating. Like she didn't belong to the world. Your world, anyway. Now your world is dry and boring. You watch everyone around you unravel recreationally. Friday night for them can be drinks and no consequences. For you, alcohol is the accelerant in the abandoned building of your heart. You has a building on fire. You haven't seen the white thing, which is your neighbor's ex-urban legend. Your friends have, though. Mallory claims she saw it coming home from the beach. The night she stranded everyone there because Gray was hooking up with that girl with the bleached hair and teeth the color of surrender flags. She thought it was a weird white deer. Connor almost hit it from driving home drunk one night, he alleged. Everyone thinks that what he did hit the one night wasn't so lucky. He said it was a freaky white worm thing, like a great pale caterpillar at the edge of the woods, suddenly visible as he drove by. The most detailed report of the white thing was Nate's version. The fact that he was on massive amounts of acid should be taken into account. But still, in Nate's words, everybody else had gone back inside to watch a movie. Donnie Darko, lol. I'm super fucked up. I want to go for a walk. It's beautiful outside. It's late, but I'm walking very carefully on the shoulder of Route 39. The snowflakes look like stars landing on the street. And then I remember Mallory telling me a weird story about that thing she saw. All of a sudden, things fell off, like the temperature changed or the street lights started making a different noise. There were no cars either. None. You can see the traffic lights swinging, one side blinking red, the other yellow. And then under those lights, in the middle of the road, down the hill, you could see it, the white thing. The thing moved weird. I guess it was hopping? That sounds so fun, so carefree. It wasn't carefree, it wasn't fun. This wasn't marbles and hopscotch shit, you could tell. His body was big and lumpy. It was white, like fur, I guess, but dingy, like a faded outfit. I think he was about 80 feet away, and it looked at me. Big weird ears or horns or something flopped on the top of its head. Then it cocked its head to the right and just stopped. I felt like I could feel all the air around me, like the individual particles of air. I could tell it was looking at me, its eyes. I know I was too far away to see them, but I could. They looked like huge circular swimming pools filled with black, rotten water. I could smell it too, like spoiled meat cooking. That's when it held out its hand, standing there under those swaying traffic lights. I just stood there, unable to move. It wanted me to come to it. It wanted me. And then there's a car out of nowhere behind me, honking and skidding, then coming to a stop like 10 feet past me. This dude gets out screaming at me, telling me I'm in the middle of the street. He could have killed me, and I'm just screaming back to him about the fucking rabbit. And he's like, "What fucking rabbit?" And I'm like, "That big fucking rabbit under the lights." And he points down the hill screaming, "There's no fucking rabbit, you crazy motherfucker." And of course he was right. No fucking rabbit. Nothing. But I don't ever drive on that road. Ever. All Alice sees is the color. Back when she was a kid, in her booster seat of her parents' SUV, she remembered vivid flashes of white whenever they were driving past the long stretch of forest. At her bedroom window, when she was little, right before she fell asleep, the white would creep up the glass. She had weird dreams as a kid, deer with their legs caught in some fence decaying, GMO wheat twisting into fields, drilling trucks pouring hot, diseased runoff into the lakes, and always bursts of white. The white thing started coming in her window when she turned 12. It was the color of bone. It never said anything. It pulled her blankets down. She started not being able to sleep. Whenever she did, she'd have these ultra-vivid dreams of subdivisions on fire. White fires burning blocks all the way down to the ground. This clearing of the forest where kids come to smoke pot and make out, she sees the white thing, just there where it said it would be. It touches her. The pine trees, the white birches bend around her. In the dead of the living forest, the white thing talks to her in whispers, made of echoes of bulldozers and the scratch of blueprints for new homes. You watch. She's holding a gasoline can now, the kind people use for their lawnmowers. The whispers are an orchestra made of crickets and cicadas. Alice is walking away now. She doesn't look at you. Her red shoes are little fires at the edges of the things as she walked back to the party. It's still snowing and the snowflakes are all over the trees and you step on the ground. The white thing steps on them as it walks to you, breathing heavily, its body distorted and luminous. The snowflakes don't look like anything anymore. They blow in the wind, spiraling above the flames and the sirens and the illuminated evening, falling over everyone and everything, bright and cold and white. For our next story, this seems to be written anonymously as there is no author to credit. This story is called Darkness in the Rearview Mirror. I have always been uneasy driving alone at night. It was the worst the first few times when I'd just gotten my license, but the nagging fear has never gone away to this day. It's disorienting to look into the mirrors and see nothing, and I mean nothing but the consuming blackness of the night. It makes me hesitant to check the mirrors. Should I see this dark void or worse, someone sitting in my back seat staring at me? In the summer of 2013, I found myself driving home alone on Highway 902 from a party. It was almost midnight, and needless to say, it was pitch black. As usual at night, I was on edge. I had the radio off and could hear nothing but the muffled roar of the tires on the pavement and the dull hum of the engine. I stole a glance into the middle of the rearview mirror, saw nothing but darkness through the back window. I know that I looked back and saw nothing, I'm sure of it, just the seemingly endless blackness of the night. I remember it so clearly because not 10 seconds later, a car passed me from the left, headlights on. I had one of those sudden adrenaline rushes like when you think you see a person outside your bedroom window when it's just a tree. Or when you start awake at night with the feeling of falling. 10 seconds earlier, nothing had been behind me. Suddenly, a car. I drove all the way home shivering and knowing something was off. The next morning, I found 2 sets of scratches near the back of my van. One was on the left rear, one was on the right. The car was pretty old. They could have been there for months, but that was the first time that I distinctly remembered seeing them. In hindsight, there are 2 possibilities for what happened that night. Possibility 1. By some glitch in reality or something paranormal, this other car had somehow appeared behind me within 10 seconds of me checking my mirror, like some weird ghost crap or something. However, the second option is what makes my blood run cold whenever I consider it. It didn't occur to me until months after the fact, but it makes me dread driving alone at night even more. Possibility 2. The car was normal. It had approached me from the rear and had passed my left. However, something large and wide, as black as the night, had been clinging to the rear of my car, obscuring my view through the window and leaving white scratches on the side. And I had inadvertently driven it home with me. Okay, so for our next story, credit goes to Fialo and his essence. This story's title is Catching Up. It is with you at your birth and will haunt you to the day you die. What am I talking about? I'm trying to put out the real answers to these questions. What is in the corner of our eye? Why do we dream? And why do we die? Okay, let's start. Some people say it's a monster. Others say it was just your imagination. They are all wrong. The real reason is the essence. The essence does not have a face or limbs or any body parts. It is just all that is evil in you. All that you have hated and hurt, and every thought of the suffering that you secretly wish could be out through as much hurt as they have given you. But the essence is after you and only you. It is always with you in everything you do. It is with me as I am writing this, and is watching me type out all of its secrets. But the essence cannot hurt you, for it is trapped in the corner of your eye. You look at it, and you want to know what, so you turn around. Nothing. So you're probably wondering, what exactly does it look like? Well, it is just a vortex who watches you, makes you feel anger, a deep swirling abyss, which only angers and crushes any good emotion. So, in the end, all you can feel is anger, pain, and suffering. That's how it feeds. It races after you, eating up your past, your memories, everything you've ever done, and it just chases you in a desperate attempt to escape from that godforsaken corner where it is held. Why do we dream? Because this is the only chance he gets to turn the contents of your day into a grotesque and twisted version, as he gives you a view of how it sees the world, bloody and depressing. To him, everyone is massacred and can only feel pain and wants only destruction. That is the reason for nightmares. All good dreams are just to lend a false sense of security into our feeble minds as it secretly feeds off our bad thoughts. Dreams are also connected to madness. Anyone who has gone insane has had the essence revealed to them, and they are constantly haunted as it tells them they want to hurt you, to torture you, so do it to them, it will be worth it. But he can shapeshift and make it look like it is actually someone else. It is the reason for paranoia. Why do we die? Well, remember how I said that the essence is racing after us and tearing up your past? Yeah, well, your birthday is a date which boosts its speed up. It becomes more obvious that it is saying, I'm catching up, in a taunting yet creepy and threatening voice. It'll watch you as you age and wither, watching and waiting and anticipating for the right moment, still running that never-ending endurance to reach the end. But when it does, you may just be sitting in a chair or reading a book or knitting when you suddenly feel a slight pain in your eye, in the corner of your eye. You remember, don't you? That corner which used to petrify you. It used to haunt you and would get visions and maybe even write about what you saw, ripping out, tearing free, all those years watching and following your every move, aging with you and scaring you, just waiting to strike, to torture, to kill and then feed on. Sometimes people are dead on the first sight. They call it a heart attack, but it's really just petrification, scared to death. Sometimes a murder is witnessed, but that is the essence hiding its crime and framing someone else. Well, either that or the person's essence is acting in them as they go through this solemn activity, but completely unaware of the commotion that is stirred up, because the only emotion that they will feel at that moment is anger. But there's a warning, 4 words uttered in such a way that only you can hear. I've won the race. And truly it has, because we all die, and we will always be beaten by our vision of this demented creature. For the next time you feel alone in the world, and that no one cares, just remember, it is always with you, but it does not care for you. It is always watching, waiting, and wanting your blood. It has been with you, back when you were born. It is with you now, and it will always be there, forever and ever, and you cannot get rid of it, however hard you try. Our next story for this evening is called A Haunting. I remember it clear as day, as if it had happened yesterday, even though it was almost 11 years ago. I didn't have the best of childhoods, if we were being totally honest. However, it was anything but uneventful. This all began on a Friday, on a day where there was no school. It might have been due to an inbound hurricane that Miami was just known to be plagued by, or just because the superintendent of my school at the time felt like canceling, or a holiday. Any way you slice it, though, it is irrelevant. I was at home playing Super Smash Bros. Melee on my GameCube with my brother Philip. I was 11, soon to be 12, and he was 7, soon to be 8. We did almost everything together. Not to come off that we always got along, though. We fought a lot, as brothers do. On this particular day, however, my brother and I hadn't been fighting. In fact, we hadn't had a bad fight in nearly a week. We were eager to stay joined, even nosing our way into each other's business to stay involved. About 4:30 p.m. rolls around, and I decide I want to take a break from the game to get some lemonade. I walk down the short hall and cut left down the next short hallway leading to the family room/dining room, and then went into the kitchen. My father and stepmother also hadn't been fighting either. Strange, considering I'm hard-pressed to think of moments when they weren't. Anyway, I happened to look over at the giant dinosaur of a TV to notice they were watching a movie I had never heard of. "Hey," my father yells. I look back at him startled. "You don't want to watch this," he said. "It's too scary for you." I heeded my father's command, poured my lemonade, and quickly left the kitchen, but my curiosity had been aroused. I had to see what he was so concerned with me seeing. I returned to their room, where my GameCube was set up on a smaller TV, and my brother asked why our father yelled at me when I went in. I told him that they were watching something scary in the kitchen. Both agreed we should prove ourselves brave in our father's eyes by watching any amount of the movie that we could. Of course, we went back to our game, but carefully watched the clock, waiting for 6 p.m. when our father would start cooking dinner for us before we left for our church group activities. When he called us into the kitchen, we could watch at least the very end of the movie, which we had deduced naturally would be the scariest part, and shrugged it off as just a movie. The anticipation made my pulse race, like the anticipation of waiting for Christmas, but different. Dad was going to be so proud of us, I thought. 6 o'clock finally crept upon us. Like clockwork, our father called us into the kitchen. We shot our way through the house, desperately hoping we could at least catch the last 10 minutes of the movie. We piled onto the couch while my father stirred Kraft mac and cheese noodles in the boiling pot. This was it, the moment we had waited for, and I remember regretting almost immediately sitting in front of the TV after what we witnessed. The movie was Jeepers Creepers. We came in at the police station where the monster, which is a Wendigo for those who ever wondered about it, pops out and Spider-Man's his way toward the main characters. I remember seeing it and thinking, what in the hell is that? I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't look away as the monster revealed its wicked strength, bizarre form, and terrible roar. I looked at my brother for moments. He was horrified. I was too, but as soon as the movie ended, we shaped up. My father set our full plates on the little table in the kitchen, completely unaware that my brother and I had watched the last portion of the movie. We were silent, but traded smiles and short giggles, as if to mask that it had terrified us. I remember trying to lord over my friends and church group the fact that I had watched the scariest movie ever, which, in all respect, is still true in my opinion, stating that none of them would have ever been able to handle it. One friend specifically, the pastor's son Dalton, replied with, "Yeah, you're probably right." As night came on and the safety of the light receded, the thrill of what I had achieved began to wane, and the reality of my fear began to sink in. I thought, strangely enough, that by that point, especially after I've been to a church meeting and having a lesson from the pastor about God protecting believers, the fear would have been scrubbed clean. But it wasn't. So what did I do to deal with the unshakable terror that infested my little heart? I stayed up until midnight playing Sonic Adventure 2, Battle to distract myself from the images that played themselves over and over again in my head of that horrible monster. In the past, when something had scared me, this method worked, diverting my focus towards something that did not frighten me, something I had power over. And I did have power over in this game. I was actually very good. Finally, midnight rolled around and I was tired enough to go to sleep. I suspected I would have a nightmare cry when I woke up, and that would be the end of it. But nothing could have possibly prepared me for what happened next. As for mentioned, my parents' room opened into a short hallway which had their room on one side. My room was on the other side, and something was in the middle, clinging to the wall in a squatting position was a figure unlike anything I had ever seen before or since. It was monstrously large enough to easily injure or kill a child of my stature, and threaten anyone in my whole family. I could only discern certain features it possessed through the darkness in the hall, darkness that it seemed to emit. Sharp claws on the end of its toes and fingers, folded wings like a gargoyle's rested on its back. Strands of curly gossamer hair seemed to be the only soft part of this manifestation before me, yet most of it seemed to be shrouded in its own darkness. If I was terrified before this apparition made itself visible to me, then there is no word to describe the fear that overcame my very soul that night. My voice was stolen out of my throat. I wanted to scream, but to call for help, something, but my instincts begged me to reconsider, as if doing so would antagonize this interloper. My breath was sucked into my chest. My hand clutched the doorknob with such strength as to force my fingers to shake. My eyes streamed silent, hot tears. Somehow I managed to break the deadlock and close the door, slowly, as if it somehow wouldn't notice. I remained mostly paralyzed, though. I staggered back to the space between the wall, where my TV and GameCube were set up, and laid down on my left side. I wanted to pray, but even the voice in my head was stolen from me. I clutched my arms and curled up, hoping the morning light would come and chase away the nightmare that sat in my hallway. But for the moment, with the door closed, I was safe. To my horror, I saw the white door swing smoothly open, like someone had pushed it open politely to come in. The hot tears I felt before returned, streaming with even greater intensity, burning my face. I covered my mouth with both hands, slammed eyes shut, and trembled there in the dark until exhaustion took my conscience from me. But even my sleep could not save me. It pursued me in the depths of my dream in a way I could come to expect in the future. I was running for my past. I was running for my life, past people who looked at me with confusion. I could hear voices say, "What's the matter?" or "Are you afraid?" or "Can I help you?" I could never reach out to these people. I could never muster my voice, only run from the nightmare. As I ran, it killed, slaughtered, destroyed, massacred anything that stood between it and myself. When in my dream I ran into soldiers prepared to fight it, I knew they were doomed. No weapons they could bring against this monster would even slow it down, only make it angry, and so I abandoned the haven they attempted to make for me, only to find myself alone. It caught me, and I stared up into its face, not long enough to get a good look, but it devoured me. I woke with a jolt. I was alive. I was alive? The dream felt so real. The fear still paralyzed me. I couldn't speak either. I remember awkwardly trying to move and not being able to speak. I was in that condition for several more days. When I finally came out of it, my family asked what was the matter. I didn't answer them. They wouldn't believe me. How could they? They would only sit there and tell me why what I saw wasn't real, and there was nothing to be afraid of. But there was. I had already seen it from myself. I shouldered this for some time alone. This horrible being of darkness loomed over me everywhere I went. It took up residence in the corner of my room, opposite my bed, to glare at me in my sleep. Oftentimes it pursued me in my dreams, ripening the fear as often as it could. I became the victim to a demon I was entirely powerless to stop. 2 years later, a friend suggested, when I confided in her the truth of my plight, to call the name of the Lord in its presence and demand that it leave. From what I had learned and what I had been taught, I knew that ought to work. Demons aren't more powerful than God, I thought, and she reassured me it would work. The thing I didn't take into account was that demons are more powerful than people. That night I did just as she said. I waited in my room until I felt its presence. When I turned and saw it towering over me in the corner, I repeated over, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I compel you to be gone." I repeated that over and over and over, progressively getting louder and louder as I would say it, only stopping before I came to a shouting point. I could see that it was still there, but my confidence had built. For that night, at least, I was unafraid until that nightmare reoccurred. It wasn't long before I started high school, a brand new chapter in my life, the chapter where I could take my first steps into manhood, or so I thought at the time. And it was then that I began to rationalize away the demon that haunted me every night. Because compelling to leave in the name of Jesus failed to remove it from my room, my house, my life. It must not actually be a demon. Perhaps it was more of a projection, a mentally instilled image of the thing that most terrified me in my young life that I needed to adjust to. Over a very short period of time, it became easy to believe that. But the story does not end here with this revelation. One night early in my freshman year of high school, something in particular happened. The demon was not in my room, manning its typical post. I sat up later than normal that night, as if waiting for its return, mostly out of fear that it would try to get the jump on me in its reality opposed to my dreams. But the night crept along and it was nowhere to be seen. Was it gone? Had I done it by acknowledging that it was nothing more than a projection of my overactive imagination, generating an image of fear? To quote Abder from Halo 3, "Were it so easy." I was woken from my sleep that night in a way I will never forget. A blood-curdling scream blasted through the entire house in the middle of the night, waking everyone up. My stepmother and sister were the first to respond as the screaming continued. They rushed over to the source of the screaming. My brother, in his room adjacent mine, screamed as if something horrible was attacking him. I saw the light from his room pour into the hallway and under the crack of my door. My sister and stepmother tried desperately to calm him down, but he was shaking with fear and screamed about being covered in human hand-sized spiders that crawled all over him. A nightmare it must have been, but a dark premonition lingered in my mind as to what might have caused this. My brother batted away any notion that it was a dream. The spiders were real, he insisted. They came from the man in the black with red eyes. My sister told me the next morning that his whole arm shook as he pointed at his curtain. My brother said he was standing in the curtains and laughing. From that night on, in any hours of darkness, my brother would always scan the dark in search of that dark figure with beaming red eyes. My sister did as I expected she would do with me had I confided at her. It's only your imagination, it was just a dream. Shh. I never said a word. I wished that I could. I wanted so badly to tell my brother that he wasn't alone, that he wasn't crazy, but I wouldn't have that chance for years to come. One night something happened that never happened once before. It was at my grandmother's house. I was 15, he was 11. We chose to stay for the weekend because my cousins were in town. The thought crossed my mind to tell my cousins Travis, the oldest of the grandkids. But what would that accomplish? My brother woke us all up, trembling and crying. Crawled up into the 3-seat couch that Travis and I were attempting to share and nuzzled in between us. After being woken like that, my cousin was prompted to ask what was wrong. He's here, my brother worked out. The man with the red eyes, he's outside staring at me. His voice was no higher than a whisper. He has a knife. I looked out the glass door that fed into the back porch with a brick floor lined with a screen wall, and outside of it was a figure shrouded in shadows, peering in from the darkness with piercing eyes, a shade of red I couldn't compare to anything but hell itself. In the 4 years that this demon had haunted me, it followed me everywhere I went, be it to a friend's house, a family member's, or even out of state to my mother's. This was nothing new, but never before and never again have I seen such eyes could strip away all courage and resolve to believe I was anything but powerless and afraid, and never before had I seen it at the same time as my brother. I remember one night when I was 16, growing fed up with the stupid fear that deemed only to exist in the dark place where one should feel safest, but when I felt most endangered, but enough was enough. I thought to myself, I'm 16, damn it, I'm not going to be bothered by some stupid fear I had when I was a little kid. I shot up out of bed. The only real courage I felt through this experience, though I had said it was only a stupid fear, I still knew that it was a very real stupid fear. I stared back at it through the dark, searching for the eyes I knew to be red. After not seeing its eyes open, I hopped off my bed, landing like a cat as if I still was afraid of provoking it. It remained in its place, motionless. I walked towards it slowly, half expecting it to vanish the closer I got, proving once and for all that it was a figment of my imagination, or for it to attack me as it had attacked my brother, proving once and for all that it was a real demon feeding on my soul. The only sound breaking the suffocating silence was my pounding heart that compelled me to reconsider my present course of action. The other was my stifled breath, heavy from fear, and the rapid beating of my heart. At last I stood before it, this giant thing that haunted me every moment of every night for the past 4 years, encroaching 5. It was broad, it probably as wide as 2 of me. It exuded not just darkness, but power. I could feel tremendous pressure surrounding me, pressing down as if to force me to my knees, but I wouldn't let myself fall. I stretched out trembling fingers from a shaky hand and reached my hand forward. I'll pass my hand through it and it will disappear. Then I'll be rid of it, I assured myself. This plan would work. 1. Can't touch a figment of my own imagination and reality. It would simply vanish and reality would set in, and reality certainly did set in. My hand disappeared into a shadow for a moment as I swiped it through the dark figure. It emerged as logically it should, but the dark shadowy figure remained. This demon would not be chased away so easily, and I knew this was no figment. It wasn't the boogeyman. It wasn't some nightmare from years ago that came around every so often. It was real, and as I stepped back away from it, I felt it pushing down on me with its body, with that very pressure I felt when I stood before it. It continued growing stronger and stronger until I leaped across the room and landed in my bed. I still didn't feel safe. I had angered it, or made it laugh. I don't really know, honestly. A lot of things would start changing for the better, it seemed, that year. My mother was moving to Georgia with my stepfather out of Fort Walton Beach, a place where the demon made a habit of flying over the trees above my head and briefly eclipsed the moon when I would walk home from my neighbors. As a new way of creating fresh fear, they had invited me to come up and stay with them in this hotel for 2 weeks while they sorted out moving into the new house. The demon had followed me there as well, as it always did, and I had come to believe that it always would. Its presence became so familiar, I was even aware of it during the day. It had become apparent to me that it never truly left me alone. It only became less visible. I'd come to believe a fear would be constant in my life, a fear of this thing, that it was real and it would chase me in the shadows, that it would invade the sanctuary of my mind and my dreams and wrap it all into a frightening illusion too close to reality to tell the difference. But one night in the hotel, the biggest change of all happened. I went to sleep completely aware that the demon was watching me from the far corner of the hotel room opposite my parents' bed. I knew that it knew my fear had waned once again. I knew a nightmare would be coming, even in my dreams I knew. In that dream, it was the night of a full moon. I was surrounded by my closest friends, all attempting to enjoy themselves around each other's companies with a late-night swim at a watering hole they found in the woods, conveniently by a road. I knew what was going to happen, so I knew I needed to keep watch. It was coming for all of us. We would have to run. A shadow swiftly passed over us, created by the light of the moon. I knew it wasn't some bird. I called out to my friends to run as fast as I could back to the vehicle we had with us, a black truck, a yellow punch buggy, and a white sedan. My best friend at the time, Jean, and I took the punch buggy. I don't know how or why that happened. We got tricked somehow. But before we could follow the others down the road, it was there, cutting us off. It stood menacingly, flashing those red eyes that burned brighter than the high beams of a car. "Ram it," I said to Jean. He punched the gas, tires screamed, and the little car shot forward. Much to Jean's surprise, it leaped into the air and ran over the top of the car, just like in the movies Jeepers Creepers. It was attempting to recreate the initial fright that started it all, I figured, but instead of staying to try again, I urged Jean to keep going, keep running, and I knew from previous nightmares that there was no fighting this thing. We hadn't gone more than 5 minutes before we came upon the wreckage of other vehicles. They were completely torn apart. My friends still alive inside, but barely. Jean and I frantically hauled them out and took to our feet as we could. Suddenly the ground shook ferociously. 3 walls shot up around us, blocking us in with only one way out. And when we turned around, there it was, standing at the far end, wanting to kill us all. I looked at my friend. He was afraid. I turned my head over my shoulder to see my other friends hurt and equally as afraid. I looked forward again at this demon that thirsted for our blood. I wanted so bad to protect my friends, to save them from the gruesome fate this wicked demon had in store for them. My hands balled into fists, and I started walking straight towards it, with everything in me urging me to run away, to find a way out. It trudged towards me. I could feel its pressure pounding away at my spirit, snapping my courage every moment that we drew closer to one another, until at last we stood face to face. I trembled just as I did the last time I had faced it this way. It was so powerful. I thought I would collapse and die there, but I didn't. Fearing I didn't have much time left, and desiring to save my friends, I looked up into its face and said these 2 words, "Get out." My heart pounded out of my chest while I waited to see what would happen next. Would it skewer me on a spit? Would it chop me into tiny pieces with its blade-edged wings, or just continue to crush me with its titanic force? I didn't know, but I would not allow it to see that I was afraid. Not this time. To my shock, even to this day, 7 years later, it turned its back to me and walked away. The pressure subsided. My pounding heart's pace returned to normal. I could breathe again, and for the first time in 5 years, I woke up without feeling totally afraid. I couldn't feel the demon's presence anymore. It was over. It was finally over. Eventually, I would come to tell my sister about what I had experienced, but only her. I didn't have to tell my brother about it. He saw it too. To finally be able to tell him what I had wanted to say, that he wasn't crazy, that I believed him every time his head saw the man with red eyes, meant more to both of us than we ever realized. After learning that I had defeated it, it wasn't long before he stopped seeing it. The shadow had passed. We were safe again. I didn't think my parents would have believed me, and I was right. They wouldn't have, not unless they had seen it from themselves. For years it stayed a secret between my brother and my sister and I, respectively. We could trust each other, but we knew everyone else would think I was just seeing things, or that Philip and I were just little kids with overactive imaginations. Even my sister didn't believe it until I started to explain to her why my brother was seeing things, and that the way I described what he saw had matched up perfectly. All she could say was, "I'm glad I never saw it," and laugh. I'm 23 now. I believed this was all behind me after my victory, and now served as a story to either motivate people that any fear can be conquered, or to be used to scare the crap out of whoever I wanted. But last fall, while up at college, I received a phone call from my stepmother. That isn't the unusual part. What was unusual was the first thing she had said to me. Have you ever seen something in the house? It was a loaded question, I thought. Sure, I'd seen lots of things in the house, but what specifically was she getting at? I asked and she told me the story of the events the night before. I was laying in bed when I had to go to the bathroom. When I sat up, I saw something dark move in front of the bed and go into my bathroom. I thought it was your younger brother, but when I laid back down, he was asleep in the bed next to me. I didn't need any more evidence to know that what I had been through and what I had seen was real, but now at least I could explain to her those frightening moments in our past that perplexed her to that very day. I told her how I discovered it was a demon, and it had fed off my fear. It had also latched to Philip and stayed there for 5 years. I told her everything. The nightmares, seeing it everywhere I went, even the time Philip and I saw it together. So she investigated, and she discovered something truly frightening. Ours was not the only house this demon had been. Most of the people, I want to say 20 out of 30, all said the same thing. A dark figure would enter their house, and weird, unexplainable stuff would happen. These things ranged from mildly scary to downright terrifying. We eventually linked it to a family that still remains unknown, who regularly sacrificed chickens and leaves their remains by the train tracks on the opposite side of the neighborhood where my house was. We don't know to this day if this demon was summoned intentionally or not, but those people unleashed a powerful evil into this world that continues to lurk in the shadows of a place that I called home. Alright, so the credit for the final story of this evening goes to TheKreepingPastaK.A.T, aka polonium poisoning. This story is called A Very Special Christmas Supper. The first time you meet your girlfriend's family is extremely important. Maybe they will become your family too. You have to be funny and charming, but not too funny or too charming that it seems unnatural. You don't want to be a faker or bootlicker. When I was about to meet Mabel's family, I couldn't stop feeling anxious. At 25, I had dated a lot, and I knew she was the woman of my dreams. She was beautiful, successful, sweet, the most supportive and generous person I had ever met in my life. We had been together for a little over 2 years, and I felt so at ease with her. All the time, it was like we could be our true selves to each other. Her parents, young sister, and older brother all used to live in another country, so we still didn't get the chance to meet. We talked over Skype and FaceTimes a few times. They seemed to not dislike me, but you know it's not the same thing. They were already at Mabel's spacious modern house in the suburbia when I arrived on Christmas Eve. I cursed myself for not being the first one there, but no one seemed to mind. Hi, Jonah. Her father, Richard, opened the door for me, enthusiastically shook my hand, and then decided it wasn't enough and half-hugged me, patting me on the back. Such a businessman. Don't worry, Mabel told us you had work today. His warmness both shocked me and relieved me. For a man in his 50s, I assumed, he was incredibly handsome. Richard had auburn hair like Mabel and was tall and fit. He guided me to the other family members in the living room. Martha, Bernie, Fred. This is the famous Jonah. Looks even better in person, am I right? He strongly patted me on the back again. Look how good you look in this suit. Martha, Mabel's mother, was overjoyed to see me and landed 2 kisses on my cheek. She didn't look one day older than 35, and just like her daughter, she smelled good. After hugging me, she screamed to the general direction of the kitchen, "This one's a keeper, Mabe." Next was little sister. Bernie was around 15, blonde, and had a face that looked carved on white marble, like her mother. She rolled her eyes with a smile, saying that she thought her parents were too much, but in an affectionate way, and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Jonah. I hope you enjoy yourself today." Last but not least was Fred. He was one of the best-looking mans I've ever met. Richard and Martha complimented me, and I know I looked alright, but compared to him, I'm more akin to a trash bag. He was tall and strong, both in arms and legs. His trousers and button-up shirt looked amazing on him, fitting perfectly, like he was an Armani model. His hair was shiny and his teeth perfectly aligned. I'm not ashamed to say that if I wasn't exclusively into chicks, I'd fall for him. None of them looked this good in video, but I dismissed it as the quality of the frontal camera/webcam. That explains why they complimented me. I was probably fucking ugly on our calls. Please have a seat, son, Richard pointed me to a chair. Mabel will change and be in here in a second. The five of us had a great time talking, shifting between lots of entertaining topics, and getting to know each other better. Every single one of them was interesting, and I honestly couldn't wait for them to become my family. Sure, I loved my parents, but they are so normal. Around 20 minutes after I started socializing with them, Mabel came downstairs. She was stunning. Her makeup was perfectly done, her hair looked like rubies, her dress was the wind, and her face was sweeter and prettier than ever. I was truly wonderstruck, and regretted that for a second after meeting her family that I thought she was the least gorgeous person of her kin. I couldn't hold back anymore. I got on my knees in reverence, then straightened myself and proposed. I had been carrying the ring in my pocket for a while, waiting to do it sometime shortly after I had met her parents. Well, it was a little quicker than anticipated. Everyone in the room erupted in screams of joy. Mabel emphatically said yes a few times and held me tightly. After a few seconds, the others joined us in the hug. It was the perfect Christmas with a perfect family. I'm so glad our family is complete now. Richard's eyes were full of happy tears, and he squeezed my face between his hands and kissed my left cheek. So let's please eat, Bernie asked in a typical impatient teenager tone, but with a note of joy. The tidbits I had earlier were not enough. Sure, sweetie, Jonah, let's go to the dinner table. The boys will get the main dish. Martha guided me to another room. The table was long, filled with side dishes and perfectly set. Richard and Fred soon entered the dinner room with an immense plate filled with a roasted human? I thought my eyes were deceiving me, but nothing else could have the size and shape. It looks delicious as always, sis. Bernie was happier now than before. Is this? I babbled. A human, Mabel responded like it was the most natural thing in the world, like it was merely a turkey. It actually tastes great roasted if you know how to adjust the oven temperature. And boy, does she know, Fred added with a smile, starting to cut the meat. The seasoning is amazing, too. Upon a better look, I noticed the body belonged to a young male. Bernie greedily ate her first bite. Instantly, her beauty and youth became uncanny, almost unbearable, like she was glowing with an otherworldly light. Come on, son. Richard gave me a fatherly look. We're beautiful, rich, smart, and successful. Who would ever get that without a little ritual here and there? We only need to make it once a year. It's a great cost benefit, Martha remarked. She served herself with potatoes and one of the feet. When she noticed I was staring at her dish, she explained with a smile, I just love to nibble on the bones. And it don't have to be a female virgin. This would be so boring and old. As long as the person is young and beautiful, we can make do. This is some frat guy who tried to force himself on my friend, Bernie explained. Well, not on my watch. All their explanations made me consider it all extremely reasonable. Don't you love me? Mabel batted her lashes, knowing very well I loved her more than anything. Don't you want to become almost perfect? Like us? We know damn well that a couple that performs rituals together stays together, son, Richard said with a charming wink. Me and Martha have been together for 40 years. It's guaranteed. As I made up my mind, I didn't answer. I just cut myself a slice of the leg and decided to partake. If you stuck around this long, I want to say thank you for your support. As always, my recordings and videos are free, but I do accept donations and purchases from my Patreon at patreon.com/m/KyleAlexanderThomas0099. You can also buy books I have written on Amazon under Kelly Ann Todd, which is my birth name, as I am in the process of legally changing it, as an FYI. I am in the process of changing my birth name to my new name as Kyle. You can also follow me on Instagram at KyleAlexanderThomas516. Links to these stories and credit is available on my YouTube version of my narrations under Kyle Alexander Thomas. And guys, remember this time, I'm back. So, that's all I have for you this evening. Stop by for more chills and thrills.